Hello, lovely people, and welcome back to Lit for Queers, where I usually talk to you about queer books, but once a month I bring to you queer news from all over the world. I've had a couple of very hectic months, so I had to skip May, and I'm only now managing to discuss June news, but bear with me and let's get into it anyway. We're starting off with Uganda. Uganda's LGBTQ plus community is facing intensified persecution following the enactment of harsh anti gay laws 2 years ago, according to an international NGO. In a report released recently, Human Rights Watch said Ugandan authorities have perpetrated widespread discrimination and violence and spread misinformation and hatred against LGBTQ plus people since the 2023 law was enacted. The 2023 Anti-Homosexuality Act made consensual same-sex relations punishable by up to life imprisonment and aggravated homosexuality, whatever that means, punishable by death. As the legislation took effect, rights groups and international partners condemned the law and withdrew funding. The Human Rights Watch report says the government has followed up the legislation with a campaign of persecution, detailing widespread police abuse, including harassment, extortion, and arbitrary arrests based on perceived or actual sexual orientation or gender identity. More can be found on Al Jazeera, and the link will be in the description as usual. Moving over to Russia, another controversial country for queer people. Since Russia's Supreme Court declared the so called international LGBT movement extremist 1.5 years ago, despite no such formal movement existing, the country's queer community has been subjected to growing pressure, fear, and repression. Under this sweeping designation, any public display of queerness, being a rainbow badge, a photo with a same sex partner, even a book, can be interpreted as extremist. All of the queer people who spoke to the Moscow Times said that the main problem is that the boundaries of what counts as illegal under the extremism declaration remain unclear, prompting many queer people to hide their sexuality altogether. In 2024, Russian courts handed down 146 fines for so called gay propaganda, an offense first introduced in a 2013 law that has been expanded over the years. Since the extremist designation, Russian authorities have opened at least 12 criminal cases on charges related to LGBTQ activities, according to the independent rights watchdog OVD Info. These charges are punishable by up to 12 years in prison. Another activity that could lead to jail could be going to a nightclub or even organizing a party. One of the most tragic cases in the wave of persecution for LGBT extremism is that of 48-year-old Andrei Kotov, whose death in a pre-trial detention center raised serious concerns about the pressure faced by those accused under the anti-LGBTQ+. Much like in the US, literature has also come under scrutiny. In recent weeks, at least three major publishing houses, Samokat, Ripol, and Exmo, sent requests to booksellers to remove certain titles deemed to contain LGBTQ content from shelves, demanding either the return or destruction with written proof of disposal. Insane, right? While the risks faced by LGBTQ people remaining in Russia are difficult to define, at least 83% of respondents in the report from the Moscow Times said that they feel endangered following the decision to label the international LGBT movement as extremist. And for some, the current level of repression against the community has made emigration a near certainty. You can read the full article on the Moscow Times, and the link is in the description. Going over to the US, the Trump administration ordered the termination of the national LGBTQ plus youth suicide lifeline effective July 17th. The Trevor Project received official notice that the Trump administration is initiating the closure of the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifelines LGBTQ plus youth specialized services program within 30 days, which comes into effectiveness July 17th. In September 2022, the Trevor Project began providing its best practice crisis services to LGBTQ youth through the 988 Lifeline. The Trevor Project serves nearly 50% of the LGBTQ youth specialized services contact volume. Last year alone, the Trevor Project directly served more than 231,000 crisis contacts and trained and supported nearly 250 crisis counselors. The CEO of the Trevor Project released a statement saying that this is devastating to say the least. Suicide prevention is about people, not politics. The administration decision to remove a bipartisan, evidence based service that has effectively supported a high risk group of young people through their darkest moments is incomprehensible. The fact that this news comes to us halfway through Pride Month is callous, as is the administration's choice to remove the T from the acronym LGBTQ. Moving to Romania, tens of thousands of Romanians joined an LGBTQ march in Bucharest, demanding civil union partnership legislation and equal rights after a highly contested presidential election last month. The European Union state has so far ignored a 2023 ruling by the European Court of Human Rights, which found that Romania had failed to enforce the rights of same sex couples by refusing to recognize their relationships. Socially conservative Romania decriminalized homosexuality in 2001, which is decades later than other parts of the EU, but still bars marriage and civil partnerships for same sex couples. However, roughly 30,000 people attended the parade. The march comes at a fraught moment in Central and Eastern Europe, where far right parties have gained ground in the last few years, unfortunately. And speaking of Eastern Europe, Hungary's capital Budapest held its biggest pride parade in its history despite prohibitions from the state. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán first spoke about his goal of banning pride in his annual State of the Nation address in February, telling organizers that they should not bother organizing this year's event. Then in the spring, in line with his wishes, Parliament amended the constitution to state that among fundamental rights, children's right to healthy development comes before the right to assembly. And the law on assembly was modified accordingly, prohibiting the organizing of gatherings which violate the provisions of the law officially called the Child Protection Act, known also as the anti-LGBTQ law adopted in 2021. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán warned people to stay away from the banned parade, threatening clear legal consequences for anyone taking part. Government warnings, however, only turned what is usually a low-key event attended by a few thousand LGBTQ activists and their friends into a mass rally against Mr. Orbán's government. Please go read what the actual mayor of Budapest did to make sure that the parade would happen, because it's hero behavior. But in any case, the police watched the Pride parade from the sidelines, but by late afternoon had made no effort to halt the flood of people surging through central Budapest, as they were unable to really find any marchers performing lewd acts or evidence of the bacchanalia that the government had been warning against for weeks. And the message that was sent was very clear, and it was one of unity and one that clearly did not reflect Orban's own ideas and hate. And there you have it, everyone, a recap of June 2025 and all that concerns queer people around the globe. Until next time, be careful and stay safe. Bye.